Hello and welcome everyone. Welcome to our Regcast on business process management. Now BPM, we've done this before and it's often considered to be a way of automating these big mass production processes that you have. What we're dealing with today is how that can be applicable to things that aren't that, things that maybe you're not thinking that you could use some kind of business process management for. Well, you can. At least that's what our guests today are saying. So let's find out who our guests are today. Well, as you know, I'm Tim Phillips. I'm always here. But also today from Freeform Dynamics, we have the big dog himself. He's top of the pile. He's here with a smile. It's Dale Vile. Hello, Dale.
Thank you, Tim. Good to be here again.
Now, Dale, we've had a few problems. If you're watching live from the UK, you'll know that we've had a few problems with presenters this week getting themselves into trouble. So you're going to have to curb your tendency to run off at the mouth.
Oh, okay. All right.
All right. The microphone's always on. Okay. And also from IBM Software, our other guest today is Gary Gummersall. Gary knows everything about this there is to know, don't you, Gary?
Not sure about that, but we'll try.
Well, you've got less than 1 hour to tell us.
Well, that's not going to be enough, but
you're going to have to keep some
of
it inside, actually, for this.
It's good to be here anyway, thanks, Tim.
But, you know, we'll try and tell you the things that you need to know. And to make sure that we do that, remember for the interface today, the most important button that you have to press is the one where you can ask a question. Now, I will one note of warning about this. As always on these heavy topics, then if you can keep the questions down to less than 5 paragraphs, then I've got a chance of reading them and paraphrasing them, because I have to paraphrase them in 1 sentence or less. So often that's quite a challenge for, well, definitely for me anyway. Also give us your feedback. Also, you'll be able to get hold of the slides. One reason you would want to get hold of the slides is they're terrific, but there's a lot of stuff on them. And there's a lot of good information on them. And there's also 2 or 3 slides that go into more detail about some of the things that we don't have time to present to you today and you wouldn't be able to see in the window that we've got. So they're really worth getting hold of if you're serious about doing something about this. Well, you want to know what you've got to do, you know, what this is, and Dale's going to tell us about that. Dale, why are we here today?
Well, it's pretty much as you said a few minutes ago, Tim, in that lots of organisations have big business change programs going on from time to time. You know, those things that you give sexy names, Project X, whatever. And
that's not sexy. Well,
all right.
Project Triple X.
Project Melissa.
Yeah,
or
yeah, okay. Yeah. You see, I told you.
I know.
I told you. Okay, let's just say a project name.
A project name, yeah. And
male or female.
There's those kind of things that you bring out the big guns in terms of tooling techniques. You know, all the kind of heavy stuff comes out that you alluded to earlier on, the BPM techniques, etc. But for every one of those, obviously, you've got a lot of ongoing activity and smaller projects that need dealing with. And you know what this chart is saying here is that a lot of the time people are going from one extreme to the other, that highly rigorous, highly structured kind of BPM end, to just using PowerPoint or maybe a little bit of lightweight Visio, that kind of thing.
Emailing around Excel spreadsheets.
Well, exactly, all that kind of stuff.
The rest of this stuff, yeah.
Yeah. So the big question is, you know, is there stuff that we do at that hardcore end that we can extract and not apply as is, obviously, because that would be overkill for a lot of the everyday stuff. But is there some goodness in there that we can extract and apply to more sort of broad everyday change activity?
Gary, this real for you?
Well, absolutely. I think this kind of notion of how do you broaden BPM into the wider knowledge base of the worker community. So traditionally, BPM in the domain of the systems analyst and the systems team and the IT department, and how do we use those learnings and understanding and techniques into the kind of wider mass of the key people who are operating your business, essentially. So that's the larger community of the workers, not just the IT function.
Right, so it's that, it's the submerged bit of the iceberg we're looking at.
Absolutely.
Effectively. Okay. Now, for the next bit, what we can see from the reg readers is room for improvement. Well, there's a big room for improvement, isn't there?
Yeah. Well, basically, I think the original wording on that was significant room for improvement, but
I took that out. I don't like the word significant. I like figures.
Meaningless.
I like numbers. 51% room for improvement.
But basically, what people are saying, this is reg reader data that we're looking at here. So basically, most people are saying yes. You know, we do a lot of change stuff, but there is a big room for improvement. We could do it a lot better, especially This is just one chart. Obviously, we did a whole study here, but a lot of the stories we got back were about, that sort of everyday change stuff that we mentioned a few minutes ago, and how do you control that, and how do you get some discipline into it, and that kind of thing.
Well, let's have a look at that and how that breaks down. There's even big room for improvement amongst the broad users of BPM, isn't there?
Well, there is. I mean, there's two things from this chart that we're looking at here, and basically what we're looking at is we took the respondents from this particular study and we grouped them into those people that were applying BPM really broadly across, lots of projects, not just those key ones. The middle guys are those that are using BPM just on those selective big projects, and then the rest that weren't really into it at all. And the question was, how well do you do all of this stuff? How well do you manage change in your organisation? So you can see the gradient there. That's pretty sort of self-explanatory. So there seems to be a pretty good indication that if you do roll it out more broadly, you're more likely to get a better result and control things. But as you quite rightly say, that's not perfect either.
No, I mean, it's still the minority of people, even amongst the broad BPM users, Gary, who are comfortable with what they're doing there, and they say they're very effective.
Well, yes. I mean, again, the opportunity is obviously to how you go beyond that first project. I mean, one of the things that we see and have found over previous iterations of the BPM story is that people can get locked into this notion that you do detailed design implementation at the systems level, and you fulfill a need in the business that may have or may not have fitted the requirement that was posted 6-12 months before. And then how do you go beyond that first project? How do you genuinely engage the wider business around things that are critical to that business now, or the things that are going to change the performance characteristics of that business in a highly competitive, cost-constrained and volatile space that we're working in. So it's getting beyond that first project and getting broader adoption is really what we're trying to do.
And I do think people have been on a learning curve, to be honest, because a lot of the technology, a lot of the skills, the disciplines and stuff have been quite specialist. So
they're not new, are they?
Well, they're not new.
No,
they're not new, but the concept of applying them more broadly is relatively new. And I think that's what we're seeing here, and that, we're kind of in a bit of a transition. A lot of the tooling, a lot of the stuff that Gary's organisation delivers and others is becoming a lot more accessible, usable by mere mortals, and that's allowing things to happen. But it's still a bit of a work in progress.
Right. So let's have a look at where us mere mortals might want to use it on this. Gary, this is for you. I mean, we're basically saying that a lot of processes now just aren't what we would traditionally consider to be BPM accessible.
Well, yeah. I mean, again, the slide here is very much recognising the huge volume, variety, and actually velocity of information that's flowing into your business, across your business, to your suppliers, to your customers, and how you get a sense of control over the significance of how that is impacting your performance as a business. And so, we're kind of, I guess the title of today's conversation around what does BPM mean beyond the automation? What usefully can you automate versus how do you manage those exceptions? Exceptions now can account for maybe 40 or 50% of the, I guess, path through your core processes. And so, what are the methods that one can adopt to actually apply some better thinking around improving your business in relation to those exceptions?
Now, one of my jobs today is to be your jargon nag. So we're talking about something specific when we're talking about exceptions, aren't we, really?
Well, it's where you go out of your mainline path through the process. So, rather than having a highly predicted approval process or an expense process perhaps internally, when you need to go outside of that and examine an exception that's occurred, if you're filing potentially fraudulent expense claim, for example, that path, that exception path, takes you out of process. And what's the mechanism that's best employed to do the right thing in that circumstance? And so the exceptions to the process, is what's really the place to focus attention around improvement and actually taking out cost, but also improving efficiency. So the whole business as usual construct around who is working on a particular process like that expenses process, for example, how do you best enable that team to make their thoughtful judgments at the right place and right process step to be most impactful? And so the exceptions is really where the action is. It's not what you can effectively automate or maybe outsource parts of that process. They're kind of like that train has left the station. It's really around, okay, what can we now do to improve the scenario?
So are we saying, Dale, sort of briefly on this, that the people, when we have a lot of these exceptions, then traditionally we thought, we can't use any sort of BPM methodology there, we better just give up on that and we just better do it as we've always done it, or in an ad hoc create an ad hoc way of doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd go back a little step to from where Gary started and say, you know, when you look at some departments within organisations like marketing, like sales, and certain elements of customer service even, it looks like you've got fairly ad hoc stuff going on, you know, a bunch of professional workers that happen to be sort of generating Word documents or PowerPoints or whatever and spreadsheets and sending them around amongst each other. Yeah. And a lot of people say, hey, the great thing to do there is to sort of give them some collaboration tools and let them get on and do that a bit more efficiently. Actually, though, if you stand back and you look at the way information flows, you can start to spot patterns that are going on. And there are processes there that a lot of people don't actually recognise. And I think that's actually the starting point for a lot of this stuff. Start to look at what's going on. And then once you've realised what the process is, then you can turn to the exceptions and a bit of automation on the routine stuff, deal with the exceptions properly.
And again, the next part of the discussion is really this kind of looking at the scope for automation. And
this is the full horror of how we work today, isn't it?
And this is reality. I mean, the difference between, and the whole spectrum of types of business process. And so the classic example in the kind of bit-based industries in banking, so payments and settlements, classic case where there's a system solution that's been lean sigma'd to death around the best way of doing that, making it transactionally safe and all that goodness from an IT and business requirement.
We're going to be explaining about Lean Sigma for those of you who just said, what's he just said?
And so the left-hand side of the chart around structure, so compliance, another example, where you're going through that type of operation and you need to, you know, register and record in data, persist to a database, file a record on paper of a piece of that process so you can be audited later and comply with the regulation. So there's some real structure and some real predictability about that requirement. That's at the kind of one end of the scale. At the other end of the scale, you have the kind of artful processes, so to speak, where perhaps you're doing a contract negotiation, perhaps you're trying to manage the process of innovation for a new product. Very hard to try and understand how you juggle that piece of jelly in terms of a rigorous process. It's certainly not a straight-through process. And so, nevertheless, you want to apply method to how you approach improving that process and getting more efficiencies out of the people. So there's a huge spectrum from highly predictable, highly repeatable processes that you can actually pass on to essentially IT and systems to fulfill for you and therefore automate, versus ones where you recognise you want to enable a knowledge worker, a skilled professional, potentially very expensive professional, in making a judgment call. In the centre of that diagram, I mean, the other classic example is around fraud. You can look at fraud in different circumstances. So the classic fraud where maybe you've got a real-world system where people are playing around with credit cards in different parts of the world simultaneously, and you want to try and trace that. There's some kind of event scheme, sense and respond, an event-driven type of non-predictive but certainly alert-based system where you can start to have some sense inside the process of where fraud might be occurring. So that's kind of still fairly structured, although not hard to, it's not predetermined and deterministic, but nevertheless that's one approach. But there's another way of looking at fraud that says in different types of processes where actually beyond the system things around being sensing things that are happening in the systems and in the real world, there is a need to, again, offer that judgment call. If somebody's making an insurance claim and you're looking at the accident report and trying to make a judgment about, how likely is that to be fraudulent and what are the checks required, a lot of human interaction is occurring. A lot of paper-based inputs and outputs are being generated as a result of those process steps. And you don't want to, first of all, straight-through processing automation is probably not appropriate in that sense. It's not even a viable option. But equally, you don't want to, in some cases, in some ways, turn over that fraudulent piece to a piece of an IT system that's not regulated. So there are dangers in taking the automation track too far because you lose control rather than gain control. All that you may end up doing is making that fraud happen much more efficiently, much more quickly, and that's probably not the right thing you want to be doing.
But fundamentally, we're saying that there's things on this diagram that are common across everyone that's tuned in today that they're doing. They haven't really considered that they are that these are things that can be made more efficient. Can be managed in a better way.
Absolutely. So these are horizontally. There's some interesting examples on the chart.
Yeah, give me for example about this. Something people say, I do that, but it's done in an ad hoc way.
So there are paper-based arrangements. So there are things like maybe in healthcare around. You have your radiographer looking at the X-ray material as part of a process of clinical care in the whole. I guess from the point of view of the health provider, what's the relevance of that piece of the operation, that piece of the sub-process, so to speak? How does that impact what happens next, or what happened before impacts that judgment call. And so there are lots of examples in different industries where you can talk about unstructured analysis of data, like looking at the X-ray on the screen, versus how you codify what happens next in that process, and what are the measures around that, and how does it impact your fellow colleague worker.
Okay, I'm sitting in the IT department.
Yep.
What have I got surrounding me today that I can start using this sort of methodology on that I don't consider that it's appropriate for?
So the tradition, I think we'll talk about this in a second, the traditional approach around modelling. So process modelling has been kind of like a way to, I guess, approximate reality. I think the language is kind of subtly changing. It's more around these days about understanding, perhaps you're authoring a process for the first time. Perhaps you're only now describing that process in the hospital in a way that's meaningful for the parties that operate that process. And designing and authoring a process which is more focused on the human task element as it relates to the context switches that will occur downstream, where you may ultimately obviously file a report in an IT system, you may file an audit record for compliance, you may trigger a piece of machinery to do a piece of work. Nevertheless, that workflow is really what you're trying to get under control. And actually, oftentimes, it's about authoring that as a process using the modern tooling, which is what's net new. And that's where there's huge potential for advantages, which are beyond the realm of and outside deliberately the domain of what IT traditionally would be focused on delivering.
Okay, now, if this is the sort of thing that is in your experience, or you've got a problem here that you're not getting under control, just let us know about it. Because, the doctor is in today. You're the doctor, Gary.
Could I just chip in on this?
Yeah,
before
sure.
we leave that, because I think, your question was...
to move back to it, though.
What are you likely to have in your armory that you can use? And where we started is, if you're listening to this and you're in a larger organisation, chances are you've probably got some BPM tooling in place at some point. But, you may not have thought about applying it to, beyond those big projects. So that's becoming more interesting now, because the way those tools are evolving to be more accessible, to be a bit more inclusive, that's one thing. But it's not just about tooling. I mean, just taking some of the principles and ways of thinking and applying them in Visio or PowerPoint actually is equally valid. And
we're going to get into some of that, are we? You'll help us with that.
We are. And I just want to throw in another example, really. A lot of this stuff is used to model IT processes. And, you guys listening to it, a lot of you probably have Visio diagrams and PowerPoint diagrams, at the very minimum, documenting some of the ways you do things in support and maintenance and that kind of stuff.
Right, yes, because, I want to make sure that it's something that's... Because the idea of a quick win and BPM seems to me to be mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
Is it?
No.
Right. All right.
We're going to come back to that. We're going to deal with that
for now, and we'll keep you in suspenders, Tim.
Okay. This is fine. I'm looking forward to finding out how it's not. All right, then. Again, when we're looking at stuff that goes across system boundaries, then really that BPM methodology seems to be breaking down here. Dale?
Yeah, I mean, all this is saying is that this is kind of what goes on out there at the moment.
Goes on.
And this was a Reg Reader study which was performed, through an online survey. So this is going to be the best case situation. So these are guys that actually knew what BPM was and process modelling and stuff. So for every one of the people that responded here, there's a whole bunch of people out there who...
So there's a huge blue bar for Eric does it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the point is that there's a lot of manual processing takes place. That's not necessarily good or bad, but quite often it is bad because it's not well bounded. You can see from the second bar there, there's, people can actually gain quite a bit just by putting some policy and process in place, even if there's still manual handling of documents and whatever going on. But the point is, people are just solving these problems in a very ad hoc manner out there at the moment. Right.
Okay. No. Let's look at the next one as well. What's this about persistency, Dale?
I'll just pick up on one of the things that Gary was saying about modelling, and I've got a bit of bee in my bonnet about the difference between modelling and diagramming. You may have heard
your
me
bonnet
bang
is
on
very
that.
full of bees, actually. But one of the bees in your bonnet is. That would
exactly.
be that would be correct.
So one of my bees is about this concept of what's a model, and I think the problem is it's easy to sort of draw a diagram, whether you use PowerPoint, Visio, or some other tool. that very quickly allows you to sort of get from A to B in a specific situation. But actually maintaining a diagram over the course of time as things change is actually quite hard. Whereas actually using tools that are more modelling in nature means that as you're going through that diagramming process, you're capturing the way things work.
I don't understand the difference.
Okay. So as you're drawing a diagram, you've got your objects and relationships and all the stuff that you're modelling going into a database so that it's there to be reused. So if, for instance, you draw something based on a business view of the world, you capture all that information in a repository, in a modelling environment. If you now want to generate a more systems view of the world based on that same underlying data, you're not having to draw a diagram from scratch again. And I think that's a key principle that underpins BPM. The other thing is if you have everything in a kind of live repository, keeping up to date is a lot easier. So it can actually grow with, it can actually change with your business. And the other big thing is if you want to generate a workflow from it, or even put it into an application development environment, generate code from it, all that stuff becomes possible if you're modelling, not just diagramming.
Yeah, and I was going to build on that again. From the kind of top-down view, words like registries, repositories, models, and all that stuff kind of meaningless to the business in of themselves. So the idea of taking that model even further to produce an executable process that the business can actually use, that has all the abilities of the things that you talked about in terms of life cycle, in terms of trying to get learnings from that process, trying to improve understanding, trying to do continuously improvements through time. All that virtue of doing model is absolutely the case, and certainly how it informs IT and the IT landscape of providing services into that process. Absolutely endorse all of that. But most importantly for me is this idea that once you've done that piece of work and you've invested in that intellectual property as a business, the key thing is if you can now run that as a process that impacts what your users, the wider community users, are actually doing day to day as a runnable, executable piece of process, because the technology exists now to do that, and focus on improving the worker productivity, that's where you're going to make your savings and you're going to make your productivity improvements. And I think that is the subtle change and shift in gears now around how we see BPM adoption moving forward.
Okay. Now, there's a lot driving it. One of the things that we're talking about that's driving it here is the idea that we have these people that we call knowledge workers now. I mean, I guess we always had them. We've just started.
Well, yeah. So presumably people are employed for a specific reason. They're employed to do a task of work, and we want to find ways, as I guess, as an IT function, a vendor like IBM, want to try and find some ways to enable productivity in those teams. But equally recognise that there are different, I guess, there are some really expensive, highly skilled professional workers where we need to make sure they're not doing wasteful work, they're not doing rework. And I think, oftentimes as we describe and look at business cases these days, you can always express as the number one return investment for a BPM project these days is around how do you make improvements to productivity of people in that workflow. And that, so we're talking about improving productivity in a dramatic way. So taking the amount of rework down from 40% maybe down to 5%. So really significant double-digit and more improvements in productivity is really where the action is.
So one of these people might be a sysadmin, for example.
Yeah, could be.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, onto the slightly difficult stuff. But Six Sigma is one of those things that's bandied around. Not a lot of people really know what it means. Probably less people actually use the term. You know what it means, though, don't you, Gary?
Well, again, it's this thing. So the metrics. So Six Sigma is around working within a kind of tolerance of less than 3.4 million defects per million. That's the kind of figure. So what that really means is that 99.99966 recurring % of the time you are error-free. Now that. You can't really talk around business process improvement in a formal way without recognising the kind of role of these sort of techniques. So this is something that comes inherited from kind of manufacturing, heavy industrial, over many...
Can we talk about more ad hoc processes in this way?
Well, I think in terms of the way you measure change and improvement, I mean, these are still very important, I think, as a baseline, really, for how you measure improvement. So if you're talking the case, obviously these vary. So why is 99.9% not good enough? Now most businesses, the typical average as it's measured is around level 3. What I find oftentimes, actually, you go into areas of the business where they're actually really, really down low on this chart, where actually it's maybe 40-50% of the process is in error, i.e. you're running an exception every time, or 40-50% of the time. So it's actually very low down on this chart, but it's worth understanding what that really means. In the case of, why is it 99.9% good enough? Well, it's not. These are some examples. So, 12 newborn babies being given to the wrong parents in the US every day, or 500 wrong surgical procedures. They are really impactful questions. And I think the airline example there around the dangers in having difficulties around safety. I think if you're running an airline, you want to be at 6 sigma for obvious reasons. Safety is your primary concern. Whereas if you're worrying about lost luggage, perhaps sigma level 4 is adequate. And I think it's about balancing and understanding what your direction target's going to be based upon reality. And so the reason why I think this is worthwhile as a backdrop is simply to say, look, you need to understand where you're trying to get to and what is the objective. Because what you can do, and we'll see, I think, is it the next chart if I drive, is that you can get into diminishing returns. If you get too analytical around looking at what systems can do for you, you lose the kind of size, the sight and size of the prize. The prize being, what do you meaningfully need to do to improve your business performance? And for a lot of businesses, it may not be ever a requirement to get to 6 sigma. That may be an aspiration. But actually, in reality, it's much more about how do you, first of all, connect. In this case, this is a bit of an eye chart, but really this is an example of a leasing process where you're trying to improve capacity maybe to 20 per hour of leases you can manage in an hour. And this process is currently telling me we're limited down to 15. So the question is, how do you know that, first of all? And there are techniques from methodologies like Lean Sigma that allow us to drive a focus. So looking at step K, I think in this chart, that may be the obvious choice. There's a limiting factor of 6 leases that can be processed and bounded in the context of...
So you've got 40 coming in and 6 coming out.
Yeah.
That's basically
so there may be
what the boxes mean.
So the suggestion, so you can do some analysis and maybe focus some attention around how you improve the performance of that step. But the most critical thing is, first of all, to be able to instrument, put measures in place, KPIs, to use the vernacular, across the end-to-end process. That's the only way you'll be able to measure and understand where it makes sense to make
KPIs, again, something that's often bandied around by people like yourself.
Yeah.
So KPIs basically means we are looking at how you measure the different stages, the important stages of what we're doing.
And they'll be in different domains. So in some cases, the KPI might be the time it takes to do a particular step, if that's the thing that's important for the business. It may be the cost of employing, a person to do a piece of work. It may be the cost of via an SLA of calling out to an outsourcing firm to do a piece of work for you. So there are costs, there are different rules that one needs to be sensitive to, and they're things, if you're going to actually have an ability to be agile in how you improve that process, or indeed manage variability in that process, you need to, first of all, connect the processes together. That means something in the case of, in this case, leasing or underwriting, or that healthcare example in the hospital. Connect the end-to-end process together as a workflow, make sure the key steps are properly measured, and in that way you can then start to see where it makes sense to focus the process improvement agenda.
But now, here we are, and this is where it starts to get a little bit uncomfortable, isn't it? Because if you're one of the knowledge workers that we're attempting to bring into this process, then suddenly I hear you talking to me like this, and it's kind of like you're saying, well, if I'm a radiographer, I have to look at 14 charts an hour, or else someone's going to come and tell me off.
Well, absolutely. So it's the converse fee. So that may be the traditional way that can be perceived from an IT interpretation. Because if you want to expose all the complexity, that's probably not going to be a good thing. You're going to be putting risk and noise into the process. It's really around how do you improve the process mainline signal for the important, I guess, cases that you're trying to manage. So I think if we move on to the next chart, if memory serves. So again. So why new approaches? So what I'm saying really is that techniques like Lean Sigma help us to, I think, apply some thoughtful thinking around how best to analyse a process and how to instrument that process, making the assumption we can connect the things together in a sensible way. And it's really about how we then become more intelligent in enabling the businesses and the key workers to make decisions. So cracking that code is really where the magic sauce will come in terms of BPM's agenda moving forward inside the business.
Now, to do this, do you need to be some kind of Six Sigma black belt person? Do you, because it does sound quite specialist, and it does sound quite subtle.
Well, so this is where I think that where we're saying, and we're seeing this change. So I'm going to move on, if I can, speeding through these charts here. So here's an example, and again, this is a real example of a motor insurance proposal process. Somebody's actually come in and applied for motor insurance. It transpires in this case that 30 to 50% of the process steps that one described, and this is a piece of process authoring, so this process wasn't modelled end-to-end in any way before meaningfully inside this business. And this is a real example from a UK insurance company. So what we're saying here is that this is a process actually that we are running every day. We've got tens, if not hundreds of people doing lots of work associated with this particular process. How can we get first of all, handle on what we're doing and then make some decisions about how we might improve that process? So in this case, it very much was about, let's write down that process in a way, as Dale was describing, that is closer to what we're actually going to be executing. And in fact, this thing we're looking at here runs as a real process.
So this is the thing you're talking about, the difference between diagramming and modelling.
Yeah.
Is it? Because we got a question about that. Could you explain that again?
Okay.
So sorry, Renato. Yeah. I wasn't sure I got it either, but I thought it was a bit stupid. Right.
Well, we'll come back to that in a second.
Yeah.
But, I think...
No, but he's looking at this, and this is effectively breaking down the essential steps. It's not just the job titles or the process titles or anything like that. This is actually what's happening.
I think there's a kind of initial process of, or initial sort of principle of process discovery going on here, because when people were looking at this before, it hadn't been documented by the sound of it, and you look at situations like this, and you know there's something sort of structured going on, but you don't necessarily know what it is, and as soon as you start to discover what that existing process looks like, you can then see where the inefficiencies are, where you've got a very high level of exception handling going on, you've got poor handoffs and all this kind of stuff, and then you can start improving it, which I think is your...
Yeah, so the colours on here, I mean, there are things that you can clearly, obviously detect as things that you're able to eliminate from the process, and ones that actually, yes, you can automate, potentially. But the key thing is, and the picture shows it more readily on the next slide, is that simply, when you take away that waste, and the expression that Lean Sigma guys use around mudder, from the Japanese term, is to, let's eliminate waste first of all. But in so doing, you don't just take away waste and hopefully improve efficiency as a result. You also then start to describe what is the core or common process in this example. So what is the thing that is worth standardizing on, that is worth repeating and worth scaling across horizontally your organization, as distinct from the things that are really peculiar or specific to this particular case, so to speak. And that's where you want knowledge workers to be offering their judgments on a regular, repeating basis. And that's where you start to see where's the opportunities now to do yet more automation perhaps, or certainly standardization of process, versus where you're really enabling key skills to perform their work and be most valuable to the business. And so it's a kind of like a double whammy, and a multiplier occurs in the sense that you've taken out waste, you've streamlined a process, and this is not IT. Mm-hmm. This is the workflow that the individuals are working in the business. IT plays a role and acts and performs and delivers on some of the boxes on this chart at a systems level, where you are doing things like persisting a regulatory compliance piece of documentation to the system for auditing, or you're performing a transaction or whatever, clearly. But they are prompted and driven from the point of view of what the business workflow is determining is the next course of action. And that's the critical thing. You're driving it from the point of view of the process, but it's in the hands of the knowledge worker, not in the hands of IT.
If you're struggling to read all the boxes at the moment, you don't have to if you're not in insurance. It's kind of like an illustration, isn't it? My advice is to just enjoy it. But it's the essential part with this is to be able to record this and get the exceptions and to find where the exceptions are. And it's a question from Andy here is, he's committed some processes in system engineering and support, and he wants to change them. And but do you have any tips about ensuring that you can get everyone to try and adhere and report exceptions as well? Because the problem, very often, we obscure what we're really doing.
So here's the trick that the IT can pull off insofar as, it's really about, if you've done a lot of, and this is what I often see, IT have invested time and effort and a lot of skill, no doubt, in providing value around a kind of notion of a business service, perhaps. So how you get that service exposed in the context of this process is vitally important. So the first thing is to be able to make sure which process steps are involved or are consuming that service, and making sure the business feels obliged to put a KPI, a measurement, around inputs and outputs around that thing. That's where the value will be, I guess, delivered. Because if the business can start to see, and it doesn't need to know the detail, doesn't care about the implementation and the code that exists to deliver some piece of value. It's really around, in this step, around underwriting, around proposing a quotation for that insurance customer or client or prospect. They care about, is that happening efficiently? What's the cost to deliver? What's the time to deliver? And all those other things that are meaningful for business. And so, for the IT systems engineer or the systems analyst or the program manager, it's making sure you're cognizant of where your services are being consumed in light of that end-to-end process. So that process view there that we've just authored is as important to the IT person, perhaps, than any of his Gantt charts or any of his IT service catalogue. It's only where they become aggregated and choreographed as part of a process that is really meaningful to the business that it becomes actually worthwhile having the discussion, frankly.
Dale, you've been at the sharp end of this for a lot of your life.
I think a lot of it is, it comes down, to answer that specific question, to communicating the so what aspects of this. If you take a situation in customer services, for instance, taking one of Gareth's handoff situations, somebody fumbles a case with a key customer. How often does that happen? It's a metric you can track. How many exceptions do we get of that nature? Well, that in itself is kind of interesting, I suppose, at one level. But actually, the more interesting thing is that you've got a key performance indicator there in terms of exceptions in customer service, which is probably going to drive another key performance indicator up here, which is retention of key customers. Because you fumble enough balls with a key customer, they're going to go to your competitor. So you find this always when you're modelling, you're doing KPI analysis and KPI modelling. There's the concept of some people talk about lead and lag indicators. So if this happens now, this is likely to happen in 4 weeks' time or in 5 weeks' time or next contract renewal or whatever. So I think being able to understand as an output from the whole modelling process what those kind of so whats are, we should care about this because if we don't have control over this. Those kind of conversations.
Okay, we should care about this as well. This is something that worries me too. And you nag me on this sometimes for getting excited about business things. And you say, well, no one in the IT department can really control that. No. To take your point on that, is this something the IT department should be leading?
I think IT, it kind of, in situations where you've got a lot of visibility within the IT department of what's going on, so where you do have some infrastructure in place that allows you to monitor progress and capture metrics, then obviously you have a role to play quite seriously in terms of bringing things to people's attention. Now, you might do that proactively, or it may be that you've got some requirement from the business or some objective that they're trying to drive to, and you put two and two together and say, well, actually, if we take this intelligence that we have, this knowledge that we have from our higher visibility, put it together with your requirement, then actually we can sort of derive from that some of this cause and effect type of analysis that we've been talking about.
Yeah, and I would, again, I'll try and recognise that. I'd also try and find ways to lower the burden on IT insofar as, because of this technology and the methodology is so consumable, readily consumable by the business team, if you can oblige the business to start to code what they think are the KPIs, what are the things that are important. It may be net new information that the IT department has not heard or read on page 65 of the specification that came last year. So if you can really turn it around so the business is in the driving seat and IT understands how it can then best tune its activity in light of those, that's where you get this kind of multiplier occurring, this happy marriage between a new way of looking at my process end to end, a workflow that is much more recognisable to me as a user in terms of the work that I'm trying to do, and then better recognition from the IT department that the key success factor is this KPI over here rather than the one I thought it was over there. Because frankly, when you do the analysis and you're doing it in a way that's supportive of the running process, that's where you start to find these new opportunities.
There's a lot of parallels here with, we've done a few webcasts before on business intelligence, and it's the same kind of thing in that quite often and it's the same as things like compliance, you know at the end of the day if you don't comply with certain regulations as a business, then the board of directors are in the dock. But does the board of directors actually sort out compliance problems at a mechanical, operational level. No, they don't. They delegate that to other people, and IT quite often picks up quite a bit of that, particularly around things like security. And there's a lot of the same kind of principles going on here. So I think ideally it would be great if business people led everything. I think being realistic, IT is probably going to end up carrying some of the burden of executing the improvements, and therefore it's better for them to be proactive rather than just sort of
you're going to get done with it anyway, so it's good to be on top of it.
Take a bit of control.
We have a little bit of a nag from Duncan here, who's just saying so far we've been quite heavy on the examples from financial services, and so he's looking at more stuff from engineering. Is this? I mean, I know that we've got some stuff coming up later that says this is something that happens across the board, but specifically, I'm interested in more day-to-day cases that people can say that's my life.
Yeah, one I came across, for instance, was I did a lot of work with, let's just say, a big brewery, bottling lines for beer, and the maintenance process around that. So you get quite motivated when you're making sure the bottling lines are.
You got to go to a brewery. What do they want to organise?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
It's great when the beer trolley comes around rather than the tea trolley. This was in the Netherlands, so you might guess the brewery I'm talking about here. But basically, things like, for instance, you've got an engineer going out to maintain a bottling line. It could be anything, an escalator, a lift, whatever. The guy gets there and he spots something else that needs doing apart from what's on his job card, and the process says, the existing process, what he should do now is actually raise another job, stick it back through the system, and it will come out and he'll do another visit to fix that. I mean, just simply acknowledging that the guy's got the skills and competence, and provided he's got the parts available, why not let him make that decision at that moment in time to fix what else he's doing? And that can actually transform. You can take an awful lot of admin overhead.
It's a loosening of control that goes against. On the one hand, we sit here quite often. We talk about how wonderful it is for people to collaborate, and that's a very small bunch of people who work. A lot of people who work now have a big rule book of things they have to do, don't they?
Yeah,
they just got to do them.
Well, so I was going to say, so I like the example around the service repair operation, or it could be running a sales campaign if you're trying to sell a new product or whatever. So there's lots of different industry examples that one can talk about. So the whole dialogue as it relates to how you manifest the rules. So I think that's the key word in what Dale was just saying, is that that's where, again, IT plays a role in manifesting an approach that allows businesses to set rules. So in that case, around the service guy being intelligent or using the time when he's actually out on site to do the repair, as long as you stay within the boundary conditions of the KPIs that the business is trying to measure, you can offer rules, and they can be, if you like, encoded in the process as, in a systems kind of way, if you like. So real things that one describes as a rule that gets executed in light of that event. The guy's on his mobile phone saying, I'm here now, I've got the part in the back of the van, it's going to take me 2 hours, does that fit in my schedule? That's a real world activity, but you can manage that and still be compliant with the rules that your business is operating and stay within the bounds of the measures that are important.
Well, let's just carry on with that example, because it's sometimes useful to be specific. The change request that came through was when an engineer is out there doing a job, we want the ability to raise a follow-on job, which is connected to the original job, so you keep some kind of link between it, but then that follow-on job goes into the system and away it goes. So, we're kind of sitting here thinking, but hold on, we know that engineer is competent because we've got all of his HR stuff. We know from a regulatory point of view what he is and isn't allowed to do. So if the job that needs doing, whilst he's there in front of that machine, can be done within a reasonable time window. And we also know what his next job is, so we know how much leeway he's got in terms of time availability. We know all this stuff. Why don't we just let him get on and do it?
It's tricky though, doesn't it? Because he's scheduled to replace a widget in Rotterdam at 3:15.
Exactly, yeah.
And what we've done is we've been lean enough that we've managed to compress his schedule so much.
Yeah.
I don't know. I see what I see what you're saying, but there's some difficult decisions to be made here.
There are.
And we had just one said no, IT doesn't lead this. This is one comment that we've got. This is led by a business analyst or a project champion. IT just sort of fits in behind.
And the good news is, because we're talking about the skills curve on this type of approach in terms of the process understanding and modelling is so shorter than traditional IT requirements around implementation, that becomes something that's of no risk to the IT function. If there's a mature relationship between IT and business, and IT is as a participant, I mean, nobody needs to be an expert, is my point. What we're obliged to be is participants, I think.
But how do you learn this? How do you learn to be a good participant? Take a course? Read a book? There's a lot of books about it.
No, there's tooling. These days on the cloud, you can start to be in a conference room like this. Where literally within 10 or 15 minutes of starting to think about a process and capturing the understanding of that, you can start to do playbacks as a team. You can start to iterate. Well, this is my motor insurance example.
This is last time you get insurance.
Well,
last
okay.
one you're
So order management then in a telco, you're actually processing an order for a new piece of kit, the widget in Rotterdam, whatever. You sat down there, you talk to your engineer, your installation engineer, is this your process? Yes or no? Well, actually, I don't need to do this. I need to call Joe before he allows me to, before I know which part applies in this case and where I've got to go next. So, okay, this is your process, and you can play it back to them and say, is that the process? Well, actually, no, it's not Joe, it's Fred over here in Amsterdam, yeah? And it's that sort of thing. So literally you are starting to help everyone understand what the critical success factors are, and indeed what the key steps are in that process. And then you can start to take that forward in terms of a process improvement agenda. That is not rocket science. It's actually, something else is actually quite crude at some level. But the point is, it's meaningful, and it's actually something that is much closer to reality. And what you can end up doing, this is often the paradox, this is what this diagram is talking about here, is the paradox is that actually low technology, low skills in terms of acquisition of skills are required to make huge progress. And this, again, it's another real...
These are business processes, the little blobs.
Well, these are business projects that the business has said that each of these, again, a real example, each of these, I think there's 9 on this chart, 8 or 9, each of those are materially of value to the business. The business case has said this is worth 500k to $1 million in the case of the smaller examples, to up to 5 million plus in terms of value in a real business case. And so they're on this chart because the business has some value attributed to those projects. The good news is, even in the bottom left-hand quadrant, you can do things that are low risk, low technology actually, just to manage the workflow and improve employer productivity, to mask IT complexity, to mask the need to automate stuff that's it's not really viable to automate or not even appropriate to automate, just by getting control over that process. And then the entire application of business process becomes much more, I guess, scalable inside the organisation. And then growing towards more transformational cultural change, where you go from 100 workers to thousands of workers that are all now using the same process as a real application. All the way through to the way they interact with the process, how they're coached into doing data entry more effectively, and what's really required for compliance, and making sure that's all part of the application. All those things, again, in today's modern tooling, applying some of the methods we referred to today, make it much easier to get to a point where you're driving this sort of value.
So we're saying a fundamental part of it is to be sort of iterative about it. Is to be able to sort of to say, we made this change, let's have a look what we've got now.
Yeah.
We make another change. What should that be?
Yeah, so not big bang, and again, it's a cliche, but actually, I'm very confident, and our customers tell us this as well, and I think the analysts, also observe the same, is that you can roll your sleeves up, both as a business and IT, get together on the same technology platform, which is actually tooling, as opposed to process implementation stuff, but it is really making reference to what work is taking place inside your organisation, and that is really something now you can iterate on much more readily. And make more informed choices, hopefully, about how you improve the business. So the use of connecting processes, instrumenting those processes with KPIs, and then hopefully becoming more intelligent, the business intelligence world, actually driving better decision making is really what it's about.
Dale, quite often when we're around a big table here, we talk about things in a big project sort of way. This is what you do at the beginning, this is what you do in the middle, this is what you're going to end up with. We're talking about something that's a bit different here. We're talking about a way of going on, aren't we? It's something that's got to turn up every month.
I think it's a way of thinking. A lot of people would look at this and say that a lot of this kind of analysis is, my dad would say it was common sense. It's like, you look around a factory, you see people doing stupid things every day because it's always been done that way and you never challenge it. Yeah. And you look around a sales department or a marketing department or an R&D department, it's exactly the same. And I think, we do have these two extremes, and I think if nothing else, what comes back from all the research we do, all the anecdotal stuff, you know, just from sort of real life experience as well, we know that we go from one extreme to another, and there are lots of businesses driving pretty key business functions in a way that could be a lot more structured and a lot more efficient if anyone took the trouble or even thought to go and look and analyse what's going on there, let alone, you know, proactively try and optimise it. So I don't know. I mean, this question of should IT drive it? I think that's not really the point.
IT's never really going to drive it, are they?
IT shouldn't drive it in the real world, and we know from experience, all the research we do. You know, you guys out there, so some of you are in organisations where you're feuding with various business units if you're in IT. There are others of you, you know, you're going out and having beers and you're really close to your business budget holders, and you've got a whole spectrum in between, right? So it's really hard to generalise in terms of IT in the business. But there is a lot that... I think there's a fundamental principle, which is IT does tend to have visibility horizontally across a lot of what goes on in the business, and is at least in a position to flag up some of these ideas. And if nothing else, when they do get requests down from the business for certain changes or new requirements or whatever, challenge them a little bit. Because quite often those requests are based on limited information. Because people making them don't necessarily know what you know.
Understand how things are actually working behind the scenes. Yeah. Just one last thing, very quick on Gary, before you move on from that. Does this, when you make this roadmap, does the whole roadmap have to be in place, or do you start from somewhere and want to go somewhere?
No, absolutely. I mean, it doesn't even have to be in the sense, you know, have a direction as such. It's really around, if any one of those projects has a meaningful business case, and the business is therefore prepared to invest time and energy in actually making an improvement, then it's justified in of itself. So each one of those in of itself is something that the business is looking to invest in because it's important to them, it's material in terms of its impact. But you can do it in a way that allows you to get more expansive in the adoption curve, essentially. It's not really around the nature of the project itself, it's about the scale to which you adopt a particular application or roll that out, so to speak.
Okay, here's a slide about why you should do it.
So again, just using the same terminology, again, forgive me on the signature, but basically small changes in quality of performance around the process.
So is what you aim for? Do you say, let's have a 1 sigma shift?
No, that's not the starting. The starting point is to say, you know, what can we do that is perhaps of a lower entry in terms of complexity and time to improve an end-to-end process? Do we know enough about that process, first of all, to know where to target those improvements and changes? If we've done our instrumentation properly, we've got KPIs around the right things, and we've focused on improving those, and we've written rules to actually manage behaviour that the business recognises, and we've done all those good things properly, then you'll get very small shifts in quality. Taking out that waste in that example before from motor insurance, but equally on the service repair, you have very dramatic and very significant improvements with very, in sigma terms, very small changes. So it's not a real dramatic, detailed, hardcore method requirement to go from A to B, but that's the sort of things that you see. So, and as I say, I go into organisations all the time that are down at 0.5 and 1 sigma level. It's very, very common, at least for some of their processes. So processes like approvals and expenses and HR and things that are internal, but also things that are affecting how they run a sales campaign. Yeah? So things that are really critical to their top line, not just their operational efficiency, their top line revenue growth, are still at low sigma level 1. So what we're talking about is how you change that, and again, dramatic improvements relatively inexpensively.
Right. So let's use the time that we got left here, looking at this across a whole bunch of industries. And what we're saying here is all of these processes and all of these. Are we saying all of these processes are amenable to what you're talking about?
I'm saying the method and the recognition of the role of the human and the human tasks that are performed, and the notion of getting control over the end-to-end process is universal across industries. And so we can pick examples, from various industries. Another way of looking at those examples is around this notion of a case as well. So there's a different kind of, paradigm or metaphor for business process, which is centered on the document itself. So if you're in, if you're in a legal firm and you're dealing with property perhaps, and you're looking at, data that could be hundreds of years old, really, yellowed, crumbling pieces of paper that you again need to read and understand and make judgments around, that's part of a business process. in the same way as the hospital example, or if you're in the government, you're managing, self-assessment tax returns or providing citizen services or whatever, there are cases that apply in terms of the documentation that needs to flow across that process. And so you can approach a discussion that's more centred around that view. But then it's the same process we're talking about. It's the same method around, how do we need to connect the work steps together in a real process workflow, and what do we then do to make judgments about where to focus what could be an IT-centric automation or systems process improvement, or it could be around how you engage a particular organisation through an outsourcing or whatever.
So we're saying that there's templates across these that are repeatable.
Yeah, the patterns that we see and recognise, and you can use, the common ones around horizontally around things like invoicing and purchase orders and inventories and all those kind of things that are very widely. In these cases, whether it be loans or in manufacturing, around how you're managing your logistics or your scheduling or your manufacturing cycles. Again, there are artifacts that one sees that are as patterns that again you want to be able to use in the context of an end-to-end workflow in a sensible way. And again, we certainly have spent some time in IBM building and improving the understanding that we've learned from projects around these type of areas. But again, all the things that we've referred to are applicable. And again, from a case point of view, there are, as an application view of how you manage that claim or that proposal or that sales process, that one can lift, and 80% of the core process is well understood. And
quick question that's just come in. It's just for big businesses. We haven't really dealt with any small business stuff. Dale, you take this. If there's just one person managing this, can people do things when there's a company that's only got 10 or 20 people?
Yeah, it's a way of thinking more than anything else. I mean, one of the things which I think we need to sort of come back and stress is that Gareth talks about quite a lot of rigorous theory and practice and discipline. Whether it's reading a book, whether it's sort of rubbing shoulders with someone on a project that's done in this way. I think the main thing is sort of taking the spirit of that way of thinking and applying it to whatever situation you're faced with. I was unfortunate enough to go through a lot of the rigorous training quite a few years ago. I'm now running a small business, and it's interesting. I can't help but sort of look at the world in this kind of way, but it's all still applicable regardless of the size of business that you're looking at.
I mean, absolutely. So, I mean, I run a small business as well, so I mean, I have to worry about VAT returns and annual returns and regulatory compliance things as a small business. If I've got employees, I've got to worry about how the things that we need to do in terms of the rigour I need to adopt in terms of all the regulation, but also the way that I optimise. So all the things we talked about are scalable up and down insofar as the size of the organisation.
Can I just say that some of the interesting wins are around where you have professional, high-value people, as Gary was saying earlier on, doing quite structured things without necessarily realising it. And as soon as you realise that what they're doing is quite structured, then you can do things like you can take jobs off them and give them to administrative resource or whatever is necessary.
Why are you doing this every week? We need you doing that. Yeah. Okay. Which they're probably quite happy about. Now, just in a couple of minutes we've got left. There's a lot of things on this. If you want to read all of this, I recommend you download the slides. But there's a couple of things that you could pick out that are, that are telltales of things going wrong at the moment that could go right.
Well, current candidates for this notion of getting the workflow under control from a task point of view is that if you've got that you mentioned before around you're passing things around by email, you're running processes via email, attachments, updates to spreadsheets, PowerPoints, whatever. That's a classic example of a red flag to say actually there's efficiencies that you can make in that area. If there's lots of paper involved, if you're constantly having to do rework, if you are lax or lagging behind your requirements relative to compliance, they are danger signals. And so they're the kind of examples where if you've got that situation, then the type of thinking we've talked about this morning can be applied and should be applied, frankly, in terms of getting those things under control. Yeah.
Dale, is there anything that you'd particularly pick out?
No, I think, almost saying that you can go through and use that as a kind of checklist. But I think a lot of times it's a case of following your instincts, because if you look at something, you talk to people, you go and spend an hour just in a group of people, ask them how they do. It becomes just so obvious where things are not quite right.
Don't be sentimental about it. I suppose the principle of that mudder that you were talking about is don't just hang on to that because it makes you feel comfortable. Get rid of it because it's wrecking your business.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Now we've more or less reached the end here, and we've got the links here. Gary, can you explain a little bit about these? What are people going to find?
Well, again, if people want to look at the kind of, I guess, modern ways to look at process discovery, this kind of process authoring step, and looking at other people's examples, then maybe the cloud-based what we have as IBM BlueWorks Live is a good place to start, just to start building some understanding, start to touch and feel what we've been talking about. Because I think that's quite illuminating in terms of how readily consumable that will be for your business, and certainly the IT department. The IT department are going to love how that looks and feels. So that's a good place to start. Obviously, in terms of, we talk a lot, the IBM mission and vision around Smarter Planet, this kind of notion of how you instrument process together and how you drive towards business intelligence. So we've got 3 I's in Smarter Planet. So again, there's a discussion there which might tie some of these things together at the industry level. So what it means to be interconnected in government or in supply chain manufacturing or wherever. What it means to instrument for a particular set of core processes like order management or fulfillment. And what it means to build from that awareness of the process as it's executing what we mean by business intelligence. How do we then inform business and make the right choice? So the discussion around industry solutions that refer to that is what you'll find there.
Okie doke. We're out of time, I'm afraid. One of the useful things that's come out today is you don't have to hire hundreds of consultants or go on a 4-year course to learn how to do this. This is really what we're saying, isn't it? So I hope that's been useful for you. Let us know. Give us some feedback. Thanks for all your questions. Remember, there will be an on-demand of this, and so you can share it with other people in your business, and you can download the slides. We've got some charts that we didn't show you because there's just too much stuff on them. And any more questions? Well, like I say, give us your feedback. We'll pass them on if there are some. So, thanks, Gary and Dale.
Thank you.
I've been Tim Phillips, and from our Regcast, goodbye.